Show from Teachers Talk Radio. You can catch up with all our shows by visiting our YouTube channel or by listening back at ttradio.org. Don't forget to like and subscribe to enjoy more live education conversation from TTR. We hope you enjoy this show.
Hello! Time for Sunday brunch.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Good morning. It's the Sunday brunch with Phin. Sunday breakfast, brunch, whatever you're doing, wherever you are. If you're listening live, very welcome. If you're not listening live and listening again on Podbean, welcome as well. We're talking self-esteem and stress. What does it mean? What does it look like? Share with me what you think. Have you got your coffee?
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Good morning. Sounds a bit like, what's the film? Robin Williams. Goodness me. The one, Good Morning Vietnam. Crucially not. Live from the UK. I'm a UK teacher and we just talk on a Sunday. That's all we do. So if you do want a message, all you got to do is send it on to the comments. Just type it in the comments and I'll pick it up. It'd be lovely to hear from you. We're talking today about stress and self-esteem. This crucially is the mental health hour. So I'm a psychology teacher by trade, but also a failed radio presenter. So finally, the two passions unite on a Sunday morning at 9, and then I go about my day, and hopefully you do too. So that is what we are talking about today. I know a thing or two about mental health, trained in the classroom as well to teach mindfulness, but I'm not an expert. So crucially, disclaimer, this is not therapy. Of course it's not. Why would it be? But you can, of course, join the conversation in the comments. We can talk it out right here, right now. So what are we talking about today? Well, am I worth it? Was going to be the title of today's show. Am I worth it? Sounds a bit like that popular shampoo advert. Crucially, not going to advertise it on here. But it's going to be really quite hard, isn't it, to feel good about yourself when you're overwhelmed? And that is our day-to-day, isn't it, as teachers, or at least it can be. There can just be moments of sheer overwhelm in the week, and it's surprising if there isn't. When I was training, I remember one of my mentors said to me, this is a full body experience that you're giving yourself. Not out of body experience, but full body experience. So everything, you give your everything a lot of the time. You know, the most important tool in the room is you, if you're a teacher, and of course, many other professions. But sometimes a healthy self-esteem is going to be helpful, right? So believing you actually deserve to feel better, that's got to be one of the most powerful motivators for improving stress management, both in the classroom and outside it, at least in my opinion. I mean, let me know if you think, no, I do this, that, the other. Be really intrigued. But that's what I thought we'd talk about today. Because, of course, feeling that you're unable to cope with everything that life in the classroom throws at you is going to erode your sense of ability and worth. And it's not surprising. So that is really what I want to talk about, if that's okay. That's really what I want to share with you. And hopefully in the next hour, you know, we can get to grips with everything that life throws and actually connect how your own self-image, if it isn't healthy to begin with, you might question whether you even deserve to overcome your stress and feel better. I certainly have. I certainly have this week. And that's probably connected to my self-esteem. But, you know, I don't think I'm unique in that. Or am I? You tell me. I hold my hands up. Am I talking rubbish already? We're only 5 minutes into today's Sunday breakfast. If you've just joined, very welcome. It's the Sunday breakfast with Phin on TT Radio. I hope you're okay. We're talking it out right here, right now. And if you're listening again on the Podbean app, very welcome as well. We all strive to feel calm, surely. Or do we seek out stress? Can we become addicted to stress? That's another question. But why don't we start by considering some of the techniques that, I don't know, that we could use to improve our self-esteem. When I was researching for this show, I came across this quote from Michael Kernis. It's they're an American psychologist. High self-esteem individuals are people who like, value, and accept themselves, imperfections and all. What's the phrase we say in English? Accept me, warts and all. I'm not saying that we show our warts, if we have any. I've actually not had or seen. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Anyway, that's not connected, isn't it? We're not talking medical conditions right here on a Sunday. But imperfections are something we all have, right? That is the truth. Yet this profession seems to beat you, or at least can do, for those imperfections. It's almost like, look for what you're not doing. Oh, but you didn't teach this. Well, of course I didn't teach that at that particular moment in that particular snippet that you saw. Of course I didn't. I'm talking more sort of observations, the observation culture in the teaching profession, which is connected, isn't it, to self-esteem? Because it can, unless it's done carefully, unless it's done through coaching, it can actually lower self-esteem, at least in my opinion. It's almost like a taught. Yeah, I mean, how do you navigate that? Maybe that's a separate thing. But I suppose the first thing we could talk about is avoiding comparisons. Because that's got to be a key element of secure self-esteem. Liking yourself, as a teacher in the classroom, but outside it, because there's loads of people that listen to this show. So I'm not just talking about teaching, and I'm not preaching here as well. This isn't, although it's on a Sunday, this isn't that either. I invite you, please, let me know. I've done a bit of research for this, but I am just a teacher talking about teaching, but other things as well. I know a thing or two about psychology, having taught it for 10 years, done bits and pieces as a social science. So I know something, but I'm learning. So you tell me, one of my friends said to me, there's a very popular podcaster and I can't think of their name. And probably that's helpful, actually, because I wouldn't want to endorse them either. Listen to TT Radio. Keep us on. That's all you need. We'll plan your lessons, do everything in between. Don't quote me on that either. Certainly will not plan your lessons, unfortunately. There's the disclaimer. We're just talking. Let me show the banner again. We're just talking about self-esteem and stress. And you can absolutely join the conversation in the comments, should you so wish. If you are listening again, though, then we're obviously not live at that particular moment. So you won't be able to do that. It's like lines have now closed if you're listening again. But if you're listening live and it's just gone 9:10 on a Sunday morning, the 7th of June, 2026, then of course do get involved in the conversation. But what was I saying? There's a podcaster who says, just try and compare yourself to how you were yesterday or how you were a year ago. And that fits, doesn't it? Compare yourself to yourself. Doesn't need to be comparing yourself to others, because comparing yourself with others does increase stress levels. I don't know if you found that, comparing yourself to another teacher or another person, another human, because there's always going to be somebody who can do something that you can't or has something you don't. Even if you've got a host of achievements, you've climbed the mountain and you look for the next mountain, don't you? And I feel like teaching encourages that on some level, and it's important to step out of that where possible. Really hard. But I guess we can actually borrow some insights from psychology to help us do that, because psychologists contrast secure high self-esteem with fragile high self-esteem. So secure high self-esteem is the sense that we are basically likable and worthwhile, right? That's the definition of secure high self-esteem. If we've got fragile high self-esteem, so yes, fragile, whatever you want to mean by fragile, we are going to define ourselves by successes, right? And completely ignore our failures. But by doing that, we're not going to learn from our mistakes. This should be about learning, shouldn't it? Humans, teachers, should just be about learning. And perhaps we can all lose sight of that from time to time. But I think that's key. That's got to be key, hasn't it? Is that making sense? Because the risk is we can become, and I'm guilty of this, I hold my hands up. I'm guilty of this. We can actually become easily agitated by any suggestion that our self-image might be questionable. So when building your self-esteem, both as a teacher, a new teacher, I don't know where you are in your profession, or if you're not a teacher, if you're someone else, what are you doing? But building it sounds quite provocative then. What are you doing? It's like that point the finger. I don't mean it like that. I don't mean to come across like that either. What I'm saying is, when you're building your self-esteem, maybe it's important to appreciate your accomplishments, but also focus most on those that are meaningful to you, whether or not they're impressive to others. There's a stability in that, isn't there? Do you feel that? Do you feel a stability in that? Just sit with those words. Even me saying it, I'm feeling it for myself. Because, you know, researching for this show is one thing, but actually talking it out live on a Sunday is another. What are your thoughts on that? Do let me know in the comments. Or if you're listening again, you can't. And I'll see you next Sunday. Simple as that. So we're just going to be talking about that on today's show. Got the news as well, got the papers, regular features. That's all there. But you can, of course, get involved if you want to as well. As I say, completely live. A 2011 Swiss study actually found that a key sense of building up your self-esteem is a sense of mastery. So that's feeling competent, confident, and actually able to manage your professional life. If we want to link it to teaching, we can, but beyond that as well. So that is an interesting thing, making that link to mastery, feeling competent and able to manage your life. It's the feeling, but only you can give that feeling, right? No one else. Add to that, an American psychologist, Guy Winch, advises some practical steps to increase that sense that you have for yourself. Right? So one of the things he advises, and again, this is just one psychologist, so by no means is this in any way endorsing what they're saying, but it's something that you could try. Forget generic affirmations, right? If you don't fully believe affirmations like I'm a great person, or I don't know if anyone would believe that, but if you don't, it's only going to make you feel worse by reminding that you don't actually feel that way. You know, there's a big trend, isn't there, of positive psychology in the world. And maybe that comes from America. And of course, this is a British person broadcasting, and most of us on ttradio.org. Oh, there's the alarm. Brilliant. The alarm for 9:15 news time. Because I set an alarm because I thought I don't always do the time checks, but I was in the middle of something really useful then. So before we go to the news, and that tells you surely that this is completely live, and there are no mistakes on this show. Brilliant, talking about self-esteem and making mistakes. Where was I? Yeah, the generic affirmations. Positive psychology is massive, and maybe it comes from the States, maybe it comes from somewhere else, but there's mostly British broadcasters on this radio station. We like a bit of cynicism, don't we, in British culture? Is that a fair reflection of British culture? the cynic, bring you down. But I think it's important to be aware of both perspectives, isn't it? If I can get my words out, it's easy for you to say. The perspective of imperfection, but also the perspective of hope. What do I mean by that? Well, you've got to actually believe what you're saying. Because if you just say, oh, I'm a great person, I'm the best, and say it to yourself over and over again, that's positive psychology. And that actually doesn't work. And that is, I think, what Guy Winch is advising here. Don't do those generic affirmations. You're the best, you're the greatest, you're the king. No, it's not going to work because you don't believe it. No one's the king unless you're on the banknote. And even he probably can't say, well, maybe he can. I don't know. Never met Prince Charles, actually, or King Charles. Did see Queen Elizabeth when I was about 12 years old during the Golden Jubilee. But that's a story for another day. So that's one of the recommendations from Guy Winch. Let's hear the news. And when we come back, we'll talk more about some different things that might link and might make your self-esteem that little bit better. So let's hear the news. And when we're back, we'll talk more. Only here on Teachers Talk Radio.
This show is brought to you in partnership with Hachette Learning, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit hachetlearning.com to explore the full range of titles.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
This week covers the news that Department for Education updated guidance says oversubscribed schools must not prioritise admitting pupils via managed moves over those already on their waiting lists, unless they better fit their criteria. The guidance is in its update around suspensions and permanent exclusions, which also includes a crackdown on off-rolling, removals for safeguarding reasons, and information tracking. The managed move guidance states that when transfers are taking place to an oversubscribed school, the pupil must not be admitted ahead of pupils on a waiting list where the school is operating one. Previous guidance said that parents should not be pressured into a managed move, but the new guidance explicitly says that a pupil must not be permanently excluded because of their parents' refusal to agree to a managed move. Trial managed moves are not allowed. Critical information sharing now must take place between the original and new school in all circumstances and in advance of the managed move. Further details, including examples of off-rolling, temporary removals for safeguarding reasons, directions off-site and pupil voice are all available online. Following a week of really hot weather, the TES magazine covers warnings from teaching bodies over concerns about the impact of extreme heat in classrooms. Research last year from the Department for Education found that without action, pupils could potentially lose up to 12 days of learning per year on average due to climate change, although these days did include days lost to flooding and other impacts of climate change beyond extreme heat. The Climate Change Committee published a report advocating the introduction of maximum temperature regulations in workplaces, which included schools and colleges. The CCC report says that taking an exam in 32 degrees C heat leads to around a 10% lower likelihood of passing compared to a 22 degrees C day. The proposed target of 16 degrees to 25 degrees C is not due until 2050. Union reaction and more details can be found on TES magazine website. The BBC Northern Ireland news site reports on success for a pupil-run business. The company, set up and run by pupils at Park Special School, recently won 2 top prizes at the Young Enterprise Northern Ireland Awards. Their company, called Where's My Keys, makes and sells gifts, keyrings and sensory items. They use the £1,700 profit to buy every pupil in the school an Easter egg. The story contains lots of comment from the pupils involved and the impact of the project that's had on confidence, as well as learning about finance, branding and budgeting. Finally, the BBC African news site reports the sad news of the death of 16 students in a fire at a school in Kenya. The recent tragedy follows a string of deadly fires at boarding schools in recent years in the country. Authorities are investigating, but parents of the students have been questioning how prepared boarding schools are for fires and whether dormitories meet safety standards. In addition to the 16 fatalities, 79 students were injured. 800 children were in the school at the time of the fire. Full details on BBC News. This has been Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
Thank you, Joe, and thoughts and prayers for those people in Kenya. In the UK, if you are teaching in a British school, this is what the weather's going to look like for the week ahead. So today is going to be largely dry and cloudy, although there'll be a few glimpses of sunshine too. In the evening, thick cloud will spread in from the west. Tonight, we're going to see much more in the way of cloud with a chance of the odd spot of light rain, especially during the second part of the night. So if that helps you sleep, that's a good thing. On Monday, when we head back into school, most of us anyway, it's going to be cloudy with isolated showers. In the early afternoon, a band of showery rain with some sweeping in from the west before clearing to some late afternoon sunshine. The outlook for Tuesday to the rest of the week, there's going to be variable cloud Tuesday morning and isolated showers. And in the afternoon, the showers are going to become much more widespread across the country, heavy and potentially thundery. Wednesday is expected to start mostly dry with some sunshine, but some showers are and going to develop in the afternoon. Locally, in the London area, quite thundery. Thursday looks to turn increasingly cloudy with patchy light rain in the afternoon. Do you know what? I'm a little bit relieved about that forecast. It was a heat wave, wasn't it, last week? If you were on half term, my goodness. I'm glad it wasn't during the week of teaching. That's horrendous. We talked, didn't we, last week? I was going to say last lesson then. There's the spiel. We talked last week about how if you were teaching in a British school during the heat wave, I mean, British buildings just aren't built for we're built for rain. We're built for the weather that's coming this week. Of course, if you are teaching in an international school, then that's a different kettle of fish. Very welcome if you are. Let's take a look at some Sunday papers then on today's show, and maybe some ideas that you could bring into the classroom this week. As I say, I usually, with my form, because I've got a sixth form tutor group, however you call it in your school, we talk about the current affairs on Monday. So what have we got for you? The Sunday Times, police tried to intervene in Novak trial. So this is, there's a few different headlines, actually, the Sunday Times. So the paper's lead story is that. This is the death of Henry Novak. So I'm sure you've addressed that on some level in the classroom. If you haven't, or you've not needed to, then it's a topic that is ongoing, of course, and there's lots of different opinions across the country and indeed the world, even as far as the States, around this. So the Sunday Times says that the police force at the centre of the controversy tried to intervene during the murderer's trial, but the Crown Prosecution Service said that such a step could risk jeopardising the case. So Novak, obviously, if you don't know the story, was stabbed in December by someone who falsely claimed that he had been racially abused. And police body cam footage shows Novak being handcuffed as he lay dying. So a very difficult story, one that you may have addressed in the classroom. There's also this paper, they outline a long-delayed report laying out government defence spending. That's actually dominating most of the papers. They report current Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, in talks over plans to cut government spending to raise £6 billion to fund his defence investment plan. So the defence investment plan, the DIP, was supposed to be published last autumn, but it's now due to be released ahead of the NATO summit in early July. Sunday Express, Labour delays leave Britain weak at time of war. So this is their stance on delays in publishing a report laying out government defence spending. The Public Accounts Committee, the PAC, this is a parliamentary committee that scrutinises public spending, says ministers should apologise for failing to prepare the UK for conflict with Russia. That's according to the paper. The Ministry of Defence says that a spokesman says the DIP will fix the outdated, overcommitted and underfunded programme we inherited. That's their words, not mine. The Mail. Entire fleet of UK attack subs is unfit for war and stuck in dock. So if you're just waking up today, these are your Sunday papers on a Sunday morning. If you've not had a chance to buy the paper, I actually quite like holding a physical paper. Don't tell Greta Thunberg, but I actually think that there's something in print journalism, although most of it's going digital, isn't it? So you do what you like, I guess, on that. So where were we? We were looking at the Mail, weren't we? Yeah. Similar theme then. So Mail on Sunday revealing that all 5 of the Royal Navy's Astute class attack submarines are awaiting repair work and able to sail. So it says that the lack of attack submarines does leave Britain's underwater internet and power cables dangerously exposed to Russia. The Sun on Sunday, they also have a free, we've not talked about this, the free World Cup. I say the free World Cup if you've got a TV. The World Cup, I saw an advert actually, just before I talk about this headline, that was just a picture of a TV, and it said something like, your ticket to the World Cup. And I thought, do you know what? I'm glad that we're still using TVs, because it feels like a very outdated form of entertainment, doesn't it? You know, there was a time where sitting round a TV was the main thing. Well, it's the main thing that I still do. But how much of that is now on your phone? Are you listening to this on your phone? This isn't being broadcast on TV. It's being broadcast on the radio, but also through YouTube and X and everything in between. So we are moving away from all that. But I'm glad that the World Cup actually brings people together again for a bit of live broadcasting, and probably through a TV. You're going to watch it on the big screen, aren't you? Well, I say the big screen. You're going to watch it on something bigger than a mobile phone, presumably. Well, actually, maybe there's a question. Ask your pupils this week. There's going to be loads interested in football. Or maybe not. Maybe I'm making an assumption there. How are they going to watch the World Cup? Are they going to watch on their phone? Maybe this will be the first World Cup where it's majority consumed on a phone rather than a big screen. On a bigger screen, I should say, because the big screen, I suppose you can also watch it in the cinema. So anyway, they have a World Cup magazine. This is the Sun on Sunday. But their headline, Pep and the TV star. So completely different headline to what we've talked about so far. Yes, this is their headline, leading with the friendship between Pep Guardiola, or Guardiola, how do you say his name? Never been good with names, actually. Never been good with registers. I'm still apologizing to the pupils I teach right now, saying, sorry. I mean, once the name is in my head, I can do it. But if I have to read a register, I will say even the name Timothy wrong. Timothy, I'll probably say. So Pep Guardiola, who's just left Man City, of course, as manager, and TV pundit Natalie Pike have become friends after a numerous interview for the club's TV channel. So it is just a close friendship, they report. Right, I'm going to give an opinion here. Rarely will I give an opinion, and maybe in the classroom I won't give this opinion, but that is quite a boring story. I'm just going to say that. That's just my opinion. That's one opinion. I hold my hands up. It's not the most controversial opinion, but I'm sorry, with everything that's going on in the world, including the World Cup that is happening in a week, that you could definitely talk about with your pupils, right? Why is Pep and a TV star in any way, shape or form interesting? And why would it be interesting to your pupils? And why have I devoted the last minute to talking about it? Moving on swiftly. Sunday Mirror. Nothing to see here. That's their headline. So that's their question, rather. You could have that as a learning question, couldn't you? They're asking this is the Sunday Mirror's front page. They're reporting Nigel Farage is planning renovations of his beach house in Kent, costing an estimated £700,000. So it notes the makeover comes after the Reform UK leader received a £5 million payout from tycoon Christopher Harburn in early 2024. That emerged recently, and there's an ongoing investigation, I think, about that. So I won't comment more on that, but that's their headline. A spokesman, of course, for Farage is quoted by the paper as saying, work on the first planning application began in November 2023 when an architect was first appointed. A long time before the unconditional gift was made. So that's their quote. Sunday Telegraph, FA knew of complaints against Sullivan. A few other headlines from the Sunday Telegraph, but that's their main one. They're reporting that the Football Association was aware of concerns over David Sullivan, who stepped down as co-chairman, of course, of West Ham United on Saturday, at least 3 years ago. So I think things will emerge as the day progresses and may even have emerged more when you're back in to school if you're working full-time on Monday. Sullivan left the club with immediate effect, of course, after a joint investigation by BBC Panorama and the Times newspaper into its behaviour. So in a statement, the 77-year-old says he categorically denies the accusations against him. The BBC says Panorama's story is due to be broadcast and published on Monday. So there we have it. So things, I think, will emerge in the media in the course of the next few days. So you might choose to wait before you talk about that in the classroom. I mean, all of these things, we've got to be really careful as teachers, haven't we? About what we talk about. And of course, the opinions we share. And I would never share opinions in the classroom that could in any way not constitute being fair. And that's what we're trained to do, right? We just present and say, some people think this, some people think that. Talk about it. Debate. That's all it is. Sounds easy, right? They say as well, actually, teaching is the equivalent of neurosurgery in that the number of decisions we make are akin to what a neurosurgeon would make. But our bank balance is probably a couple of noughts less. Woe is teaching. No, it's not. Or is it? There's another. Maybe that's the topic for the next week's show. Woe is teaching? ? Nearly there. The Independent. We've got stalker could hold key to freeing UK couple in Iran jail. That is quite an interesting development, I must say. So you may have come across the story of the British couple, Lindsay and Craig Foreman, who are in jail in Iran on espionage charges, of course. So they believe their best hope of freedom is actually if Britain deports an Iranian prisoner who's been detained for 23 years in the UK. Yeah, they were on a sort of around the world trip, weren't they? On a motorbike of sorts. They are pleading guilt. They are pleading, not pleading for anything. They've not admitted any guilt. Of course, they've denied it. They are pleading for Britain to deport an Iranian prisoner who's been detained for 23 years. That's the first I've seen of that, actually. That is intriguing. That's an interesting development. And of course, there's going to be pupils that you teach, if you teach in a London school, that may well be, I say there's going to be, they may well be from areas that are close to Iran or even from Iran. So that is a story that you could talk about. Because, of course, after their arrest in January last year in Iran, the couple were accused of spying. They deny those charges. Let's say that again, in case that wasn't clear. But have been given a 10-year sentence in February, haven't they? So that's that headline. The Observer, The Forgotten War, How Ukraine Fought Russia to a Standstill. So the Observer is leading on the Ukraine war with a report on how Kiev fought Russia to a standstill. Now, here's the thing. There's so much going on in the world. Take your pick. Could even go with the Daily Star. Wouldn't recommend it, but there's an option here. The Daily Star's headline, 3 leopards on a shirt. Mic drop. 3 leopards on a shirt. So the Daily Star reports that historians believe the animals on the England badge are in fact leopards, not lions. So it quotes, I mean, this is ludicrous, but it's possible. It's not impossible. Or is it? You tell me, comments in the chat. Are they really leopards? So it quotes one expert as saying that the crest dates back centuries to when the animals were not considered lions, but were traditionally known as leopards. So maybe it's not as ludicrous as first presented, but I quite like that. You could put that in. There is an option for you. There it is. Those are your papers on Teachers Talk Radio. I hope that was useful. Pick and choose what you do. Or maybe your school has a policy not to talk about current affairs, in which case don't. I'm not recommended anything. I'm not Ofsted. I'm just one teacher. I'll hold my hands up. I don't know why I keep saying that. Obsessed with holding my hands up. Oh, goodness me. Right, back to talk about self-esteem. And then we'll do some other bits and pieces on today's show. If you do want to message in, feel free. You just need to type it into the comments on YouTube or on Twitter, and I will pick it up if you are listening live. If you're not listening live and listening on Podbean, then very welcome as well. And I will pick it up on next week's show. But yes, it'd be lovely if you want to get involved in the conversation and share your thoughts. You can also tag us at Teachers Talk Radio, wherever you're watching the show. So wherever you are in the world, wherever you're watching or listening live, I say if you're watching, this is being streamed on YouTube. So there are different bits and pieces, different captions, different things. It's all whiz, because video podcasting or vodcasting is the massive thing. But of course, you might be just appreciating the richness that is audio. So wherever you are, whatever you're doing, it would be lovely to hear from you and indeed have your company. So back to the main thing that we're talking about today, the topic, which is self-esteem and stress, self-esteem and stress. I think we can say that we can forget generic affirmations, but some other recommendations from that American psychologist, Guy Winch, is identify then your authentic strengths, right? So being good at anything, however small, is a solid reason to feel confident. Now, I'm pretty good at talking, as anyone on this radio station is. I think you've got to be. It's called Teachers Talk Radio, so I think the clue's in the title. So being good at that is key. Hello as well, by the way, to Peter and Beth, who are listening live. Peter's just been ordained as a vicar, so congratulations to him. And Beth is a UK teacher, teaching RE, I believe. So very welcome, very much welcome on a Sunday, whatever you're doing. Feel free to message in. But yes, authentic strengths. What do we think of that? Also, Guy Winch recommends engaging your abilities. So if you can do something well, do it more, because you're just demonstrating competence to yourself. Do it more is what Guy Winch says. And also accept compliments. Now, as British people, well, I'm British, got a British passport. I'll show you if you like. I'll stream it live on YouTube. But as a British person, we tend to, it's also in our culture. Is that fair? To sort of reject a compliment that we're given. But if you're uncomfortable with the phrase or praise, you know, you're doing a good job in the classroom. And I think as teachers as well, we can almost rebut it. So maybe just say thank you and actually just allow yourself to hear good things. So there's my adaptation of Guy Winch's recommendation, accepting compliments. But actually, if you're uncomfortable with praise, I'm uncomfortable with praise some of the time, a lot of the time. So actually, I'm going to try that this week. I'm probably not going to get a lot of praise this week, but if I do, I'm just going to say thank you and allow myself to hear good things. And then affirm yourself. It's healthy, he says, not vain, to be pleased by doing something well. Is that reasonable? Does that make sense? So I suppose the conclusion to this segment is rather than comparing yourself to others, just work on appreciating your best attributes and believing them, not just saying them. And for that, they've got to be realistic, haven't they? As a teacher, I'm good at this. I'm not so good at that. as a teacher, I'm good at this, that, the other. I'm not so good at, I don't know, conflict resolution or something like that. Because I guess the hope with time, this is going to heighten your self-esteem and improve how you manage stress in the classroom. That's what the research suggests. Putting that out there, try it out, see what you think, and get back to me. If it doesn't work, I'm not preaching it. I'm literally just saying that's what some of the research says, and that's what some experience suggests as well. Those are all options, but feel free to message if you think, no, that's not going to work. Time to hear from our sponsors. When we come back, we'll talk more right here.
This show is brought to you in partnership with Hachette Learning, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit hachetlearning.com to explore the full range of titles.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
You're listening to Teachers Talk Radio, and it's the Sunday breakfast with Phin. What are you doing for your brunch? What are you doing for your breakfast? I hope you're enjoying it, whatever you're doing.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
We're talking about stress and self-esteem. So if you do want to message in, feel free. It's just gone 42 minutes past 9. Or as they say on the radio, the time is approaching 18 minutes to 10 o'clock. It'd be lovely to hear from you. We're talking for the next 20 minutes.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
And indeed, you may have seen, I've posted it on my Instagram. I've posted it on my LinkedIn. If you found it from there, very welcome. If you found it from somewhere else, also very welcome. Yes, on the Instagram, I did I was quite proud of how I did that, actually. I'm not very good at the social media. I'm pretty good at talking. There it is, there I am talking about my strengths and my weaknesses. Yeah, I hold my hands up. I'm going to stop saying, let's just ban the phrase hold my hands up for the next 20 minutes. I gave you a countdown there, didn't I? But anyway, I was just looking at what I posted and I thought, I've actually tidied up to do that. I've actually tidied up. And there's something in that as well, isn't there? Deserving a nice space. How is your classroom looking? Do you not think and do you not find that actually lessons go better when you've got a tidy classroom? There is actually research to suggest around obedience. Someone called Stanley Milgram did a whole variety of studies. You may have heard of the electric shock experiment. So there were variations of that electric shock experiment. If you haven't heard of it, I'll explain it very quickly. Essentially, he got someone to pretend to give electric shocks to someone else. That was it. Well, actually, it wasn't pretend to give. The person gave electric shocks. They thought they were giving those electric shocks to this other person. They actually weren't. Now, what he was measuring is how far you would go in giving those electric shocks purely because someone in a white coat told you to do it. That's what they were measuring, fundamentally. I mean, it was a bit clunky how I phrased it, but that was what they were measuring. Now, he then did some variations as well. And what he found was actually where it was done in a rundown building compared to a prestigious university, which was Yale. He then did the variation in a rundown office building. Obedience dropped. And his conclusion actually was location has a massive impact, called a situational variable, has a massive impact on obedience. And that's a side topic, isn't it? And that's probably there's someone who's a better presenter on here who can talk more about that. But there is something in how, as teachers, actually, if we've got a messy classroom, have you ever found behavior gets worse? I have, talking from 10 years of experience, definitely seen that. Behavior gets worse if you have a messy classroom, litter on the floor, scraps of paper left everywhere, stuff coming off the walls. Actually, speaking of which, I've got to tidy up my classroom when I'm back in tomorrow. But do you find that? And I think as well, let's link it all back to the main topic of stress and self-esteem before I go too much off on a tangent, sorry, not a tandem. That would be a bike, wouldn't it? A rundown and dirty home, or a rundown and dirty classroom, or a rundown and dirty environment, right, is dispiriting, right? So when you look at your personal space, you're getting the message you're not worth anything. And maybe your pupils are getting that message from you as well, if it's your classroom. So that's my link to self-esteem, because I think there is some evidence, because if you've got this sort of clutter around you, I mean, the phrase, isn't it, anecdotally as well, tidy desk is a tidy mind. You're eroding your self-esteem, your ability to cope with stress. Now, am I just talking nonsense? Well, there is some evidence. A British psychiatrist, Neil Burton, advises creating and setting something that feels comfortable, right? So actually, Neil Burton says, souvenirs, photos, reminders of special time. You probably wouldn't put those in your classroom, although actually I have worked with colleagues that have had photos just on their desk of their children and things. I'm not sure what school policies say on that, actually, so maybe check your school policy if you're going to do it in the classroom. But if you do that, you're going to see evidence of your own value. So reminders, that's really interesting, actually, because actually looking around this tiny studio that I broadcast from, I got nothing. I got nothing. It's bare, it's minimalist. But maybe minimalist is better. I don't know. I suppose deserving a nice space and the link to environment. I've talked about how it links to behavior, situational variable. That situational variable, there's evidence to suggest that it does link to your self-esteem as well, and probably your pupils' self-esteem to that end. Does that make sense? We've really gone around today, really gone to a lot of different things. But, if that works for you, try it out. Try it out. Again, I'm by no means an expert in any of this. I know a thing or two about it, but I'm not an expert in any of this. We're just talking it out right here on Teachers Talk Radio. And we have a host of whole other fantastic shows. You can just check us out, ttradio.org, by the way, if you're so interested in exploring and even join our community. We've got a whole host of events as well that are advertised on the social medias and things. So do check that out if that works for you. Just check it out. Just head to wherever you follow us. But loads of fantastic shows even today and the coming week. You've got Lee Pace coming up on Monday. You've got Louise Pickering on Tuesday. On Wednesday, you've got Tim Small, Claire Bills. On Thursday, you've got our CEO, Tom Rogers, 7:30 p.m. It's also Points of View. Saturday, you've got Darren Lester. Alongside at 1:00 Famida Chowdhury. I'm then, of course, back with my regular Sunday breakfast at 9 a.m. every Sunday. And then after that, you can finish off your brunch and listen to Points of View at 10 o'clock. 11 o'clock is Martin Sketchley and Claudia Tumber. And 8 p.m. is Konstantinos Papas. So it's all there. It's all happening on ttradio.org. Back to what we're talking about, though, before we finish today's Sunday breakfast. There's, I suppose, a final bit. Have you heard of the self-esteem spectrum? Well, spectrum can mean anything, can't it? You can be on the bipolar spectrum, you can be on the autistic spectrum, you can be on the ADHD spectrum. There's a spectrum for anything, and there's some arguments to suggest that we're all on there somewhere. The self-esteem spectrum is what it says on the tin. A spectrum of self-esteem. So is it or is it not good to be modest? Well, perhaps that's a spectrum as well. because too little self-esteem is unhealthy. Too much self-esteem, I suppose you become overinflated, self-aggrandizing, defensive, hostile. Let's talk about that. It's quite an interesting bite to think about and talk about. So very low on the spectrum is one thing, but overinflated is another. Okay, so chronic stress, because this is the link, can make us feel bad about ourselves, can't it? It can lead us to neglect self-care, feel worse, think we don't deserve better. And I think teaching can sometimes do that to us at times if we don't manage the stress. You know, what does management actually look like? Doing nothing? Is that what a good management is? I don't know. But I suppose recognizing this pattern can just start us on the road to an improved sense of self-worth, right? Start us on that journey. We're all on a journey here in the rich tapestry of life. There we are. I'm going to try and sound not too pretentious when I say that. But it's helpful to think of self-esteem, I think, and some psychologists do, as a spectrum. Well, I mean, a lot of psychologists think of everything on the spectrum, right? So it's helpful to think of self-esteem as a spectrum. We're all humans. We're all on the spectrum. We've all got imperfections. We've all got better and worse things. But aiming for just a moderately high end rather than the two extremes is maybe the place to be in. We'll hear from our sponsors first, but when we come back, maybe let's think, where do you place yourself on this spectrum? So maybe think about that. Again, this isn't a lesson. This isn't an activity. 2 minutes, go. It's not that. We just got to hear from our sponsors. And when we come back, let's think together, because I think I've got an idea of where I am, but I'm not sure. So let's think together where we might be on this spectrum.
This show is brought to you in partnership with Hachette Learning, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit hachetlearning.com to explore the full range of titles.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Where are you on the spectrum then? Very low? Low? Healthy high? Overinflated? I think it varies, doesn't it? Day in, day out. I think I have a sort of fixed sense, but I don't think it is. Maybe it's flexible. Maybe you have to just build it up. Maybe that's key. Maybe that's what you do. Maybe that's the answer. I don't know. Feel free. Let me know. I invite you. But let's just elaborate to finish on what this spectrum might look like. So very low, maybe you can identify with that. You feel worthless. You're self-neglecting, depressive. You're experiencing chronic long-term stress. I think I've probably experienced chronic long-term stress in the past. And that has knocked my self-esteem. It's been hard not to. Low, you're uncertain, you're vulnerable, you're unassertive, you're frequently stressed. Healthily high, and this is maybe the thing to aim for on that spectrum, so it's the one along. Confident, realistic, deserving happiness, managing stress. And then overinflated, self-aggrandizing, defensive, hostile, stressed by any perceived slight. Weigh those up. Sit with those. What do you think of that? How does that work for you? Interesting, right? Pretty interesting. I'm just thinking through in my head where I might sit on that. it's probably, it's probably low still. It's probably still low, let's face it. Because that's the other thing. Have you factored in where you are as a teacher? We all bring our own personal histories. And I think sometimes my personal history gets triggered. I think that's the reality. Next week, we'll talk a little bit more around stress, because this is, of course, the Mental Health Hour on Teachers Talk Radio, a dedicated hour. Hopefully it helps. If it doesn't, I'm sorry. Switch off. Switch back on in 5 minutes when it's points of view. But next week, we'll talk about finding meaning through that stress. What's the phrase? Grow through what you go through. I saw that in a garden centre in half term, actually. Grow through what you go through. So finding meaning, making stress worthwhile, because that's, I think, something I'm just desperate to talk with you about. Now, without sharing too much, I've gone through quite a lot of stress personally and professionally recently. I'd say at the high end of stress. And it has knocked me. It's knocked me for 6 at times. But I'm sort of bouncing back. We talked, didn't we, last week about the resilient personality. Do feel free to listen again to that show on Podbean. But I suppose I want to continue to grow. And so finding meaning, making stress worthwhile is going to be key, I think, for me. And maybe it would be useful for you. Again, feel free as well to suggest topics. If you think, actually, I want to talk about this, feel free. Let me know. Let me know in the chat. Or if you're listening again on Podbean, listen again next Sunday at 9 and let me know then. You choose. But I suppose this term, this half term, which is less busy for some, less busy or fewer busy? Fewer busy. Less busy for some. It is a time where you can reflect and reflect on the year. It's sort of a tying up of things, isn't it? Tying up loose ends and getting ready for September. So it don't get me wrong, it has its very busy moments, and game time isn't really game time in a way that it's called, right? Game time is filler time. You end up filling, it's like, if you say a meeting's going to take 60 minutes, it's going to take 60 minutes. Like, that's the reality. There's always, the job is never finished, is it? As a teacher, the job is never finished. But there is a bit of time for reflection, possibly more time for reflection than before. So I thought we'd talk about that on next week's show, if that's all right. It's been an absolute pleasure keeping you company on this Sunday morning for brunch. As I say, Points of View is up next today. Next week, I will be back on Sunday at 9 a.m. and it will be a pleasure keeping you company on that very day, should you so choose. Feel free to listen to our full back catalogue on ttradio.org or follow us online on any of the socials, X, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. Check us out. And I will see you next week at exactly the same time. Have a good one.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.